I'm going to try and manage holding this on the microphone, so we'll see how this goes. Hi everyone, my name is Beck and I use they, them, or he, him pronouns. Thank you all so much for coming out today to support NAMI in Montgomery County in our effort to raise money to support those struggling with their mental health. I'm 21 years old and studying psychology, behavioral neuroscience, and women's and gender studies in undergrad. I'm a college student, mental health and LGBTQIA plus advocate, and the founder of NAMI Montgomery County's LGBTQIA plus peer support group. I have a wonderful group of friends, an amazing partner, and a supportive family, all of which I am lucky to have here with me in the audience tonight. I love to read, write, create art, and I'm exploring positive and healing movements such as yoga lately. My ultimate goal is to become a trauma-specific therapist for transgender and gender non-conforming youth and adults who struggle with mental illnesses such as anxiety, depression, PTSD, and CPTSD, and other diagnoses that may be impacting their ability to live as their authentic selves. I'm incredibly honored to have been invited to stand up here and share my story with you all. I've had mental health struggles for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I often felt like I was different and was treated as such before I had the words to understand or describe why. As a child and as a teenager, I experienced many traumatic events that happened back to back and sometimes overlapped with each other. I was bullied and hurt in many ways, mostly through different types of relational and intimate abuse. I had a hard time talking to other people about what was happening and how it was affecting me, because I had a hard time talking to myself about it. Experiencing symptoms of CPTSD were all that I had known since I was very young, so I thought what I was experiencing was normal. That couldn't have been further away from the truth. I was anxious all the time, barely left the house, had frequent panic attacks, and struggled with low motivation. And if that wasn't enough, I began struggling with self-harm and suicidal thoughts and feelings around the age of 11. I am grateful that my parents found out early and took me to see a doctor who gave me the dual diagnoses of anxiety and depression and started my treatment. However, it took me a long time to be fully honest about my experiences because the stigmas around mental illness and trauma specifically made me feel like my problems and trauma weren't bad enough. It wasn't until I turned 19 that I formally received a fully fitting diagnosis. CPTSD stands for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. You may have heard of PTSD before, which is a diagnosis given when someone goes through a traumatic event and suffers from a variety of symptoms that interrupt their lives afterwards. Most people associate PTSD with veterans or people who go through severe childhood abuse. However, that is not always the case. People can develop PTSD symptoms from anything that is traumatic to them, regardless of if it would be considered bad enough or traumatic enough to other people. There is a large stigma and amount of judgment surrounding what counts as traumatic, and that's something I hope changes as people start listening to trauma survivors more. PTSD refers to one traumatic incident, while CPTSD is used to describe continuous and/or multiple instances of trauma. Sometimes, symptoms of CPTSD are usually a combination of many different mental disorders. Some common ones being general anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, panic disorder, borderline personality disorder, and dissociative, derealization, and depersonalization disorders. Because symptoms can be so overlapping, people with CPTSD are often given a handful of diagnoses that aren't quite fitting before their CPTSD is fully recognized. Between the ages of 14 and 20, I had attempted suicide multiple times and had 4 stays in inpatient hospitalization programs. I frequently missed school due to these stays and other treatment programs I participated in. I felt hopeless and like it would be impossible for me to heal at all or live a life I was happy with, no matter what anyone told me. At the same time as all of this was going on, I was exploring my identity and came to realize that I am and have always been non-binary. I never quite fit in with the boys or the girls, and I had a horrible relationship with my body. Before I even had a word for my gender identity, it heavily affected how people treated me and made my bullying worse because I seemed so different, which added to my symptomology and lowered my self-esteem. I would like to make it clear that being a transgender and non-binary person is neither a mental illness, nor did it lead to any of my diagnoses. The only correlation between the two is that being an openly transgender and non-binary individual led to horrific, dehumanizing societal treatment that added immensely to my trauma. I feel the need to highlight this as a point of my speech, and because myself and so many of my trans siblings are facing horrible oppression right now due to misinformation and scapegoating that is taking the lives of so many transgender youth and adults who just want to live their lives as their authentic selves. It is not easy for me to share such vulnerable information, but my hope is that by doing so, I can create and echo a safe space within myself for those who can relate to my experiences to feel seen as they are. We have always been here and always will be, and I ask that everyone be respectful of that fact, even if you don't quite understand. I cannot speak for all people in my community, as we have all had different experiences, but I encourage everyone in the audience, or anyone listening, to please take it upon yourselves to seek out the wonderful, informative pieces of media that countless queer and transgender people have created to share their stories and help explain the depth of the harm being caused towards our community right now. After I came out and went through my social and physical transition starting at the age of 14, I began to be able to heal from the horrors I had experienced within my body and form a healthier, better, more connected relationship with myself once it felt like my body actually belonged to me. Why is it so important to me to be visible today? After my third inpatient stay at age 19, I began an intensive outpatient program designed for adults in the LGBTQIA+ community who have experienced trauma, one of the first of its kind in AMI, too. This program changed my life and helped me to come to terms with my diagnosis of CPTSD and learn to validate my own experiences. When I started this program, the therapist who was in charge of the group was the first non-binary adult I had ever seen before, and they were doing the job that I dreamed of. This was a huge turning point for me, because up until that moment, I didn't believe someone like me could even get to that age alive, be successful, and have a place in the field of work that both they and I are so passionate about. Representation and community were game changers for me. I began EMDR therapy, which is a type of therapy designed to help those with trauma to process the events that happened. And I now have 2 lovely therapists who I meet with on a weekly basis for both EMDR and regular individual therapy. With the support of many affirming doctors and therapists over the years, my family and friends, and my partner, I have finally reached a place in which I can confidently say that I feel happy and stable. I have been clean from self-harm for the longest time in my history since I began struggling with it, and I no longer experience suicidal ideation. I'm in school studying to reach my goal and actually enjoying it, and I get to work with others to create safe spaces for others to feel safe, to share, and to exist. I get to be the representation and support that I so needed and wanted to be as a young queer and trans person. I have been working with NAMI Montgomery County since 2022, and it is thanks to them that one of the safe spaces I get to create is the LGBTQIA+ peer support group that I run with my amazing co-facilitator, Chloe Weissman, who's not here because she's sick, but she's awesome. While I've discussed trauma-specific therapy, I have also been doing individual therapy since those initial diagnoses at 11. I've done it all, from different therapy programs and treatments to trying all kinds of coping skills. It took what felt like forever to find helpful providers and medications. I understand how impossible it can feel, but even those things that felt unhelpful in the moment have all gotten me to where I am today. Every step, no matter how small, is important. Learning to give myself credit for carrying myself through all these moments, no matter how hard, has been extremely difficult, but so essential to my healing, and the learning never stops. Don't get me wrong, things aren't perfect, and I still struggle, because healing is not a linear path, it's cyclical. Trauma is a lifelong grieving process, and I still struggle with CPTSD symptoms, as well as symptoms of other mental illnesses I am diagnosed with. But every time the symptoms cycle through me, they become easier to deal with. Life has become brighter, foods taste better, I have meaningful relationships in my life that I never could have predicted. And most important of all, my relationship with myself has gotten healthier than I ever could have imagined. I'm making my way through life at my own pace and in my own way. And by doing so, I've been able to accomplish so much more than I ever could have imagined. I always hated it when people told me that it would get better in response to my struggles. It can feel really minimizing and invalidating of the fact that in this moment, things are not okay. So I'm not going to say that exactly. But what I will say is that if you are struggling, no matter what it is, because everyone's struggles are individual to them, it is valid. Your experiences and emotions and thoughts are valid, and you are valid and worthy of healing. You are worthy of self-care, and worthy of being seen and listened to and cared for in all the ways that you need. You are not alone, and in my experience, it has always been in the moments that I least expected. The opportunities and people have shown up in my life and reminded me of why life is worth living. It isn't easy, I won't lie to you, but an easier life is possible, and there is space for you. Even if you have to dig a little harder to find it. It might not be easy or quick, but it is worth it. It is always worth it. Thank you all again so much for listening and for being here to support NAMI. Have a great walk and a great rest of your day. Thank you.